to the Halo Halo Creativity Uncovered interview series. Halo Halo is more than just an app. It's a space where artists and fans come together to celebrate webcomics. We highlight Filipino stories and beyond, giving creators a platform to share their work with a global audience. Today, we're sitting down with incredible creator Yvette Tan to talk about her work, her passions, and the personal journey behind her title as the Queen of Philippine Horror Stories. Yvette Tan is one of the Philippines' most iconic horror writers, known for blending the supernatural with stories that feel deeply Filipino. She won the Don Carlos Palanca Memorial Awards and the Nick Joaquin Literary Awards for her work. Her short story collection, Siki Horror, was a 2024 National Book Awards finalist, and she penned the screenplay for Ilawod, which was nominated for multiple categories at the 2017 Star Awards. From creepy folklore to modern chills, Yvette's been reshaping what horror looks like in the Philippines, and we're so excited to dive into her world today. So thank you for joining us, Yvette, this evening/morning, depending on where you're watching from, where you're coming from. And just as a really quick starter question for you, what would you say made you happy this week? What's a highlight of your past week?
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. What is the highlight of my that it's a Saturday today. That I think is the highlight of my week. No, I also came from a vacation. I came from a vacation to Taiwan, and I love Taiwan. I love Taipei, and I think that was also the highlight of my week.
Mm. I'm curious, do you get any inspiration from your travels?
Um, I don't, sometimes, not all the time, but I just like being in a different place because it takes me out of, the everyday. So I'm not thinking about the usual things.
Awesome.
And Taiwan has also been like it it feels very spiritual and intuitive. No, that's wrong. It calls to me. I don't know how to explain it without sounding very woo, but I feel at home there, even though, I'm just a visitor.
Yeah. That's wonderful to get immersed in it and just really feel like you're part of that culture. And so just switching gears now to the horror and supernatural genre. It's a bit different than your travels. Hopefully you're not experiencing any of that on your trips, but curious what draws you to that and how do you approach crafting that fear so it really feels authentically Filipino?
Okay, so I actually did not think I would end up as a horror writer. So when I was a child, I thought I would be an artist. I didn't think of writing at all, especially in horror, because I'm a scaredy cat. I don't like horror. But when I started writing, I just wrote whatever I wanted to write. I wrote the stories that I wanted to read that I couldn't find I couldn't find in books, so I had to write them myself. And the one thing that people kept telling me was they were scared. Like a friend had to literally take me aside and go, "Do you know you write horror?" And that's how I found out I was a horror writer. I guess you could say that the way I process things always come out fairly scary. Yeah.
Mm.
And the way I approach horror is I'm not there for the jump scares because that doesn't interest me. I'm there because ever since I was a child, I was always interested in the supernatural. And growing up in the 80s, there wasn't a big divide between the supernatural and the hard news. So you'd turn on the TV, you'd watch a news program, and you'd have like in between murders and all that, and you'd have stories about, oh, this whole class got possessed by a tree spirit. There was very, very little delineation. And I was also very interested in the stories I'd hear the adults talk about. So in between the gossip about, oh, do you know, si Manang ganyan ganyan, there's something wrong, she's going out with this guy. In between all of that, there's the, oh, this person, her daughter got possessed by a duende. Like, her daughter is friends with duendes. So this was the atmosphere back then, at least for me growing up. And also there was, even though I grew up in Manila, I was born and raised in Manila, although my grandmother hails from Bulacan. um, I was like, we did things like we'd go to a manghihilot, who, like, hilot is massage, but he'd massage you in a special way to heal you. So, and I saw, like, one time my mom invited a mangtatawas to the house, and tawas is a form of divination where they'll tell you what's wrong with you using, usually, there are different ways, but the one I saw was using candle and a basin filled with water. So I grew up with these things, and these things were normal to me. And that's how I write my stories. So these are stories that, sure, they're kind of creepy, sure, they're kind of strange, but they're also stories that it's super possible that you could have heard from a neighbor who was talking about their friend. So it's very secondhand. That's how I like to tell my stories.
That's really exciting. Yeah, and I know that you mentioned a lot about how, like the older generations really interact with your work, the beliefs that they have, surrounding what supernatural means in a Philippine context. And we were just curious, how do you believe that the younger generations will interact with your work, especially because, there's a lot of differences in, what they believe, right? And, the role that, these kinds of beliefs and supernatural ideas play in their lives.
One of two ways. Usually, it's either they grew up with these beliefs themselves. Because I've been asking younger people, do you know what an albularyo is? A healer, or do you know what manghihilot is? And they've been to albularyos, they've been to hilots. They go to Quiapo, which is the church in Manila where that has the Black Nazarene Festival every year. So, and that's famous because outside the church, you can find people like selling candles, selling spells, reading your fortune, all these things outside the Catholic Church. So these things are still here. And of course, there are also the stories that you hear from relatives about supernatural beings. So these things are still here. And some people may believe in it, some people may not. But whether you believe in it or not, you definitely know somebody who either believes in it or has experienced it. Or another way that they interact with my stories is a lot of people, especially young people, are looking for a way to define themselves as Filipinos. So this can be either in the Philippines or overseas, where they're looking to the past. So they're looking to old mythology, they're looking to old legends. Sometimes, at least in this case, in my case, I use folklore and urban legends. So it's kind of a way for them, and kind of a way for me also, to find what's Filipino in terms of how we behave or what our beliefs are.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I mean, yeah, the world is really a changing place. And of course, people are always going to have, like different connections, right?
Yes.
To what supernatural, what horror means to them. And, we're just curious, how do you bring a lot of, you have a lot of insights from, like the Philippine horror genre and mythology specifically. So how do you decide which aspects of the culture to include in your work and which aspects to reinvent or change or adapt?
Well, in my case, it's very simple. If it interests me, I will write about it. It's that simple. I will usually it has to be something that I'm familiar with so that I can work around it. Or if it's something that I'm not familiar with, it has to catch my fancy, and it has to be nebulous enough so that I can imagine things around whatever it is. So, in short, it has to interest me.
What a great way to think about it. If it interests you, then more likely it'll interest everybody else too. Yeah.
I actually don't think of, like, when I write for myself and I just hope everybody else likes it. Because if I write for other people, you're not going to get something nice. I'm not going to be happy with it.
That's a good point. And you'd be surprised. We forget how many people have the same interests, right, as we do, and we're all human, so we're all, moved by the same things and stirred by the same things. And
Yeah,
so, go ahead.
no, actually, I was surprised. I didn't expect to, because I grew up, I was the weird kid. So I didn't expect any of this. I didn't expect to be to be a writer. I always wanted to be a writer. Like, when I stopped wanting to be an artist, I wanted to be a writer. But I didn't think people would be interested in what I had to say. So all of this is a complete surprise that people are interested in my work. People buy my books. People love my stories. When Insect Hag, my latest book, it was launched. It was made available in the Philippine Book Fair last March. Middle of March. I was supposed to sign books for only 2 hours, which is a lot already. I ended up extending for 3 hours, and even then, my publisher had to cut it short. They were like, "Okay, cut off because we have to get, we can't keep clogging the lanes." So I'm very, very blessed that that's happened, but it took a while, and I did not think at all that this would happen to someone like me. Again, I grew up not very supported. So I'm Filipino Chinese, and if you're Filipino Chinese, this is not done. Like, writing is not done. It's not business. It's not engineering. It's not being a lawyer. Also, horror is not done because Chinese don't like talking about these things. Plus, I'm a woman, but I'm not like, what's the word? I'm not Phil Chai woman coded, if that makes sense. I'm not, I'm not dainty. I'm not white. I'm not somebody you can sell for a good son-in-law. Let's just put it that way. So, plus I was a very shy child. So if you had met me before, I didn't think I'd amount to anything. Nobody thought I would amount to anything. So I'm here and I'm very thankful. I'm very grateful. I feel very lucky. But I think, I don't know how it happened. And it happened despite, I found support somewhere else because I definitely didn't get it from the people who were supposed to nurture me.
And just listening to you, that resonates so much with me. And it's something that I hear from so many other people, that it's really finding yourself, right? Do you include, or do you have plans to write something that really weaves that idea in?
Not at the moment because it doesn't interest me at the moment. I will talk about it, obviously, because I'm talking about it here, but I use it as an encouragement for other people that if I can do it, you can do it as well. Right now, what does interest me? I will when the time comes, like when I'm called to do it, but until now, for now, not yet.
Okay. And you talked about how they even had to cut short for Insect Tag, right? When you had had the talk on it. And I'm curious, because we do have an international viewership here, I realize it's available in print in the Philippines, but where else could other people get it from? Is there any plans to release it more broadly?
Okay, unfortunately, Anvil doesn't distribute outside the Philippines yet, but I know that there are some resellers overseas. So usually, the Filipino bookstores will usually carry it. Archipelago, I think, sometimes carries my books. Aswang Project usually carries my books as well. Aswang Project in Canada. I'm not sure about the rest. Those are the only two that I know of for sure. But people have been messaging me that they have like random booksellers
Oh,
who they tap for their books from the Philippines, and they'll usually have them. So if you have a Suki bookseller, if you have like a favorite bookseller who brings books in from the Philippines, they'll usually have mine.
great. And I heard murmurings, an ebook might be in the works as well.
Yes, you there are no ebooks yet for Insect Hag, but there are ebooks for my other two collections in English, Waking the Dead and Siki Horror.
Awesome. And we'll put the link to your website in the show notes so that people can see how to download and get those. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
really
you.
exciting. Yeah, and I know, as you just showed us, right, you have many stories, a lot of short anthologies, that you're bringing together. And we wanted to know if there were any specific places in the Philippines or, even abroad, any rural areas or cities that that you see really inspiring your horror settings. Is there anything like that?
Okay, that's an interesting question because sometimes I'll get inspired by there's one story that was inspired by like a random building in Quiapo, and there's one story that was inspired by Balikasag Island in Cebu. So Balikasag I mentioned in the story specifically, but what's interesting is I have written stories and then found the places they're based on after. So I didn't know that these places existed until after I get there, and I'm like, oh, this is the layout of my story. This is great. One of them is from the bridge, which so I wrote the bridge. It's about the building of the San Juanico Bridge in 1972, and the house there I just made up. I imagined it. And then I go to the Malacanang of the North in Ilocos Norte, and I get up to the second floor, and I'm like, this is the layout of the house in my story, except flipped. This is amazing. And then there's another story. What's it called? Wait, hold on. Where Sidhi, which won the Palancas, which won a Palanca Award. My friend my friend read the story. My friend Erwin Romulo read the story, and he's like, I have to take you to this place because this is exactly what you wrote. So he took me to a place called Sikia Mansions in Malate. This is where all the artsy bohemian people live. He took me there, and because it reminded him of the place in my story. So it's the opposite, essentially. Like I found more places after I've written the stories than when I was before, more than basing stories off of places. But I do have stories that are based on specific houses in like around the metro, but they're private homes, so it's not something you can actually look out for.
Yeah, do you feel like sometimes it's a coincidence, or do you feel that there's like a spirit helping you out with your inspiration?
I'd like to think that there's something helping me out with my inspiration.
Nice. Yeah, that's really cool, honestly. It's like working in reverse in a way. And really, it's like there's so many ways to gain inspiration. And a lot of your stories now, your work, and even other artists within the horror industry specifically, there's many new stories, many reinventions of old stories. And in your opinion, do you feel that there's a horror trope you love versus one you feel is, for example, overplayed or ready to be retired?
I'm open to anything. I don't have a specific like or dislike in terms of tropes because as I believe that there's always a fresh way to write something or to show something. So it may be the most tired trope in the entire world, but if you can find a fresh way to present it, then I'm all for it.
I do know that you teach quite a number of students in universities in terms of writing. Is there any particular thing that you share with them in how to think a little bit more out of the box or applying a new perspective when they're writing?
Okay, what I try to tell them is two things. Number one, something which I should take to heart actually, is that the only role of the first draft is to exist.
Hmm.
So it doesn't have to be perfect. You just have to get it out there, and then you can rewrite. And that's what you eventually, show to the world, should you choose to do so. And the second one is your reader doesn't know what you know. So your reader isn't psychic. So it's your job as a communicator, because I'm also a journalist. Um, your job as a communicator, as a writer, as a journalist, as a novelist, whatever, fiction, nonfiction, even as a marketer, your job as a communicator is to um, sh- tell your audience your idea in a way that they can understand. And a lot of people forget that context is important. So they just word vomit, forgetting that, oh, we don't know where you're coming from. So if you can remember to add context to whatever you're saying, that's half the job done.
Yeah, that's such a good point because we make so many assumptions, right, when we're going in to write. I'm going to take that away. Even I think it applies in so many other areas as well, even beyond writing.
I
Um,
agree. We all have that friend who's like, "Hey, have you heard about so and so?" And you're like, "What's going on?" Oh no, they'll just jump in the middle of the conversation with a random thing, and you're like, "What's going on? I don't know where this is from." So their context is important.
yeah, definitely. And I'm curious, some of the when you write your short stories, some of them are very heavy and a bit emotional, right? How do you continue writing, or how do you work through that? Because it is so immersive as a writer to be in that space. How do you handle that?
Okay, actually, it's very hard for me to talk about fiction, the writing of fiction, and to teach fiction. It's easier for me to talk about writing nonfiction because it I have no process. Like I've never had a process beyond just writing whatever. So now that I'm doing a novel, I've had the outline. Like these are all new things to me. Um, like when you teach fiction, you have to talk about like what is the setting, what is the character. When I write, I don't think of that. I just everything just flows. So if I can get into that flow state, that's great. A lot of it is in my head. So I'll spend a lot more time thinking about things versus writing them. And then it just appears on the page.
But I think that's even very inspiring for individuals who may not have had formal training or study, that it is still possible to write amazing stories by just looking inside and just getting it onto a page. And then, like you said, it's the first draft. Then you can refine it after you do that.
Yes.
Yeah. Because some people don't try because they feel like, oh, I don't have the training for it, or I don't have the background for it.
Well, I think yeah, that shouldn't stop them. I I don't know if I should say I don't know. I was slightly trained. Okay, so I'm not a my undergrad was film, so I was a film student. And but I took a lot of classes in creative writing just because I wanted to be able to write.
Mm.
And even then, so this was the 90s. Horror, like anything, any genre that it was a no-no in the academe. So I get professors going like, what is this girl doing? She's right. She writes all right, but why does she write like this? There was a lot of pushback. So as I got a lot of pushback everywhere from, from my upbringing, my background, the academe. But since it's the only thing I know how to write, marginally well, like it's the only thing I know how to write well in terms of fiction. Like if you made me write anything else, you wouldn't get any, I wouldn't publish it. You get something all right, I guess. Um, yeah, like just keep at it. You don't tell, don't don't let other people tell you what to write. Because a lot of people are worried. What if people don't like what I write? What if people don't understand what I write? Unless it's super offensive and will make people angry, that's a different topic altogether. But if it's something that you wish that you want to read but can't find, maybe that's the hole you have to fill, right?
Yeah, definitely. I feel that's really important, especially now. There's a lot of young writers out there, a lot of people, that even follow Halo Halo, like wanting to get their voice out there. And I feel like there's people will always experience that pressure, right, to just write what they think people will want from them. But at the end of the day, I think what makes your voice strongest is really writing about something you're passionate about and something that you feel, really resonates with you. So that's really interesting to hear. And you were mentioning before that you experienced some pushback, even in academic spaces because of this niche that you created for yourself in horror. And I'm just wondering, for you and for the next generation of writers, how do you see this? How do you see this communication, these ideas around horror changing?
Well, now it's like genre is accepted now. It's being taught in universities. It's like people are writing, like there are classes on it. People are writing their thesis on it. It's accepted now, and that's great. That's wonderful. I would like, okay, it's accepted now, but I am hoping that we move on to the next step, which I hope will be the sure it's taken seriously now, but it could be taken even more seriously. Like, for example, I'm going to use horror as an example. So a lot of people until now think that horror is just jump scares. It's just there to scare you. I still get until now when people ask, "Oh, what do you write?" And I say, "Oh, I write horror." First, there's the physical recoil. There's always a physical recoil. Like I can see it. Like and then they start going, oh, I don't read that. That's so scary. Or like there's the automatic dismissal of because it's genre, because it's not, it's not like high literature, whatever. I would like people to go beyond that initial reaction and think why is the reaction there? What are we afraid of really? Are we afraid of something jumping out at us? Are we afraid of the jump scare? Or are we afraid to face a part of ourselves? Because I believe, at least the way I write horror and the kind of horror that I like reading or watching is always horror that deals with the human condition. It always has something to say about what we as people are running from, things that we don't want to face. Whenever I give a lecture on my writing and horror, I always start with behind most ghosts, because they're happy ghosts. Behind most ghosts is a story of heartbreak, right? Like why will your spirit stay on Earth? Because you died too early, you died unjustly. There's always some sort of pain involved. There's a small fraction who are here because they love it so much they want to stay. But they're just super tiny. But more often than not, there's always some sort of pain involved. And we fear ghosts because we don't understand them. They're like unruly children, right? Who just go in and out and do whatever they want. And I think that harkens to some sort of thing we don't want to understand about ourselves. I truly believe that if we can make friends with the supernatural instead of fearing it, we might be able to move forward in terms of maybe this is broad and super ambitious, but I believe that it may help in our nation building. Because in the Philippines, at least, we're a very forgetful people and we like sweeping atrocities under the rug. We don't like facing them. Like Battle of Manila, for example. We don't want to talk about it. There's a very small group of people who try to remember it every year. We were the most devastated city, second next to Warsaw during World War II. but we want to move on. We want to bury everything under modernity and pretend that we're always happy. Like the Filipinos are supposed to be the happiest people in the world, but underneath all that, it's super toxic. There are a lot of problems that need to be solved. A lot of people think that, like band-aid solutions are solutions instead of getting to the root of things. And I believe part of the root of things is getting to understand where we hurt, why we hurt, and how we can heal ourselves so we can move on as a nation. It's super duper broad and super duper ambitious. And, I might get flack for it because people might be saying, I don't know what I'm talking about. But I believe that there's something there that we can begin, that we can begin with.
Yeah, and it's really interesting to hear about, you using horror as a vehicle for, talking about change in the world or, bringing attention to, for example, historical events that people don't think enough about and, how it shapes our daily lives as well. And I think that's really cool because, I mean, at least in America, when a lot of people think of horror, they think of, oh, like a quick scare in the movie theater or, something that doesn't really speak to them outside of them wanting like a quick thrill. So it's
Yeah.
really interesting to see this other side, this deeper meaning to what horror is.
Okay. That said, I just want to add that I do it not because I have an agenda, but because it's fun for me. So, sure, I write like this, but that's because it interests me. Horror doesn't have to be deep. So that's also something I try to tell my class. It doesn't always have to be deep. If you want to write something, like my personal favorite, like my first love is comedy. My specific first love is like stupid comedies. Like if I could write stupid comedies, I would be the happiest person in the world. Unfortunately, that is not the case. My specialty is horror. So even though that's what I like writing about, I like writing about heartbreak, about how horror might weave into the world we have now in specific situations. My you What I want to tell other writers is you don't have to write like me. Write like you. I would love to read more stupid stories, for example. Stupid, like not in the derogatory sense. Stupid in the like most loving, happy sense. Like where it's all just fun and fun. I would love to read more stories like that. So that's just what I want to say. It doesn't always have to be deep.
Of course. Yeah, there's always space for different kinds of horror and, especially, like in writing, of course, there should be variety, if, that's something that you're into. And a lot of your stories that you write really resonate with people, your audience. They are able to connect with some of the themes in your writing, and really understand or see what's going on in these different storylines. And we were just curious, what's the most meaningful reaction or significant reaction that you've ever received from a reader of your work?
Every time I hear somebody tell me that they liked my work or that it touched them or it made them cry, I feel very honored. I feel honored that they would take the time to read my work, and I feel honored that it resonated with them. Again, going back to how I grew up, I was very lonely, and didn't think, you know, I didn't think that anybody would understand how I felt. So I wrote as a way to escape, only to find that there are people who appreciate my work and who empathize with it. That's it's super touching whenever I hear stories, whenever I hear people tell me that they like my work. Like at
Yeah.
the end of the day, I remember it's all, at the end of the day, it's still tiny Yvette who's like, oh, how nice, they like my work.
Definitely. Yeah, and it's really exciting always to hear, this positive feedback about people really connecting with it and, holding it close to their heart, I think. And, on this positive note, what really since you're dealing with a lot of, or at least in the past, you mentioned before, you were dealing with some pushback from people in your life, and again, horror itself was not always the genre that it is today. So, throughout the years, how have you stayed motivated and stayed positive as a writer to really get your stories out there?
Um, Good question. Well, I had to stop for a long time because I needed to make money. But in between that, I always knew when I stopped that I was going to go back to writing at some point. And a lot of writers will say this, that it's a compulsion. It's not so much that I have to stay positive because I want my work out there. It's more like if I don't get this story out there, I'm not going to be able to sleep.
More of a drive, this internal drive, right?
Yeah.
That it just has to go out. That's the strongest kind there is. Yeah. And the we were talking about the reactions of people and telling you that, this really touched me, or they really liked your story. Do you hear slightly different nuanced feedback from your readers who are, in the Philippines versus those who live abroad?
I haven't heard a lot of comments about from people who live abroad yet, so I don't know what the difference is. However, for Sikihor Sikihor, the title story. So it's about a mail order bride. So this American dude orders a mail order bride from the Philippines from Sikihor.com. And when you say, Sikihor, the province, when you say it with an American twang, it's Sikihor. So he wonders why he's getting this mail order bride so cheap. What he doesn't understand is that he's going to get her in parts. So in the Philippines, we like things in tiny packs. It's called tinge. It's cheaper in the short run. It's more affordable in the short run. So he gets her in parts and he has to assemble her. And those parts are moving. So he gets a leg, it's jumping around already, that sort of thing. He gets to the waist, so he has to assemble her. He assembles her waist. She starts having sex with him. He doesn't know what's going on, but he begins to enjoy it. It's kind of a dark comedy. So that story was published in Rogue magazine in 2008. And that story is the story that gets the most well, right now I hear that it's being taught in some college classes, some high school classes even, which surprises me because I'm like, really? Wow, the world has changed. But it's the story that has the most varied readership because the feminists like it because they say it's feminist. The post-colonialists like it because they say it's post-colonial. And the straight men like it because they're like, I've had two separate people who I don't think know each other text me the same thing. They were like, are you sure you're not a man? Check again, because apparently that's how men think. So it's the story that has the most varied fan base, if you will. There was even one guy, this photographer who I remember sometime in their 2010s, we were in the same space. He made my friend introduce him to me. This is a famous guy because he said he doesn't read, but he read my story. It made him read. So it's the one with the most varied fan base.
And it's just so interesting how you write because it's something you enjoy and you want to get out there, you want to talk about, and yet each person who reads it, they interpret it in their own way, right? There's such richness in that exchange and that communication.
Yes, yeah. I love it.
Beautiful.
I always like hearing what people think of my work because I want to see not so much the validation that you like it or you didn't like it, but more I want to know what their thought processes are like.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and aside from Sikihor, obviously it's a book that resonated with a lot of people. A lot of voices are coming in and talking about how they connected with that book. And in the future as well, are there any new projects or other new books that you're working on now that you're excited to share?
I'm supposed to be writing my first novel, so a lot of people have been asking me when I'm going to write my novel, and I've always had a problem with long form But I've managed to write a movie, and my latest book, Insect Hag and Other Stories, has a novella in it. The last story is a novella. So I will write my novel. I am writing my novel, my first novel. It was due last year, but I'm going to see if I can finish it this year. It's also still going to be folk horror. So I like a lot of my stories are folk horror, although I do have like sci-fi horror sometimes thrown in there, urban legends. But this one's going to be folk horror once again, and it's going to be not quite coming of age, but something about finding your family, something like that.
Interesting. Yeah, and I know that you predominantly worked in short stories a lot of the time before. And I was just curious, what are the challenges and what do you like most about transitioning from short stories to a longer novel in this case?
Well, the challenge is keeping my attention span. Uh, the challenge is the writing, the keeping myself and my audience interested for a longer period. So I have a super short attention span. So I think that if I can keep myself interested enough to get to the end of the novel, there's a high chance that my audience, that my readers will as well, will be interested in it as well. Yeah.
Which is perfect for this day and age with social media and right how our minds have really shifted in that length of attention. So then we talked a little bit earlier about how you're encouraging people to just write what you want to write about, and whether it's stupid horror or something a little deeper, just do what calls to you. Is there anything else that you want to leave with them in terms of encouragement of, you know, how to find your voice?
Don't worry about the publishing so much because, like, no, okay. What I want to say is just get the first draft out there. Get it out there. Worry about the publishing after. So even if a traditional publisher doesn't want to take you in, you will at least find an audience. There are so many avenues right now. You don't have to rely on traditional publishers anymore. There are indie publishers. Now self-publishing has become legitimate. Just don't fall for scammy vanity presses. That's different from self-publishing. There are other, there are other websites where you can find your community, your fan base. I feel that what's most important is that you write for yourself, and the rest will be gravy.
That's a really strong message. Yeah. And, as I mentioned before, as we talked about before, it's really finding what your passion is and really, being able to flesh that out, especially creatively. So that's really inspiring to hear.
Yeah,
And
I,
I
I'd
believe,
also like I'd also like to add, don't be afraid to change your mind.
Hmm.
Like if in the middle of your writing career you decide, oh, I don't want to write horror, I want to write sci-fi or I want to write romance. Don't be afraid. If that's what your soul wants, that's what your soul wants.
definitely. Yeah. In a way, the first audience is really yourself, right?
Yes.
Of course. And I believe we are coming to the end of our time now. So we just wanted to thank you again for sitting down with us today and really sharing your own story, how you really got into horror and, the inspiration behind your stories, what that means to you as a writer and what that will mean for your audience as well. And so for our Halo Halo audience, just to recap, today we were talking with Yvette Tan, the queen of Philippine horror stories, and now we get a bit of more insight into what that really means for her. Today we talked about the inspiration behind many of her works, what writing horror was like growing up, and hopes for the future, what new writers will bring in, what the genre of horror as a whole will look like in the future, and a bunch of really exciting stuff. And just to remind audiences of our promos, Insect Hag, one of her newest books, is out in the Philippines, hopefully on ebook as well. So be on the lookout for that. Insect Hag. And her first novel will hopefully be coming out soon as well. So follow Yvette on her socials, Instagram, for updates on that. And hopefully we'll see it soon. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, Hazel. Thanks, Katie. Thank you,
Yeah.
everyone.